looked up and I said, wow, I can never understand why I'm so brilliant, so absolutely brilliant. I said, Mr. Gould, I presume. I do that because I deserve it. You don't do that. And he said, Mr. Francks, I presume.
And if it's not there... Like Woody Allen's character Zelig, Don Francks seems to have been part of almost every cultural shift for the past 7 decades. He has sung with Ian Tyson, played guitar with Lenny Breau, sung with Petula Clark, and danced with Fred Astaire. And he's acted in more films and television shows than he can remember, and has a busy side career as a voice actor. We met the incredibly young 82-year-old Don Francks in Toronto.
So let me start by asking, the only thing I'm going to ask you about your childhood will just involve a stage name that you had once.
All right.
It's Don Francks Sinatra. And my understanding was you were 10 years old when you had that stage name. That anybody would have a stage name at 10 is amazing to me. How come?
Radio was a very important part of my life, and it afforded me time to listen to music, which was the most important thing in my life, always, even though I didn't know it. I was able to hear all kinds of different music at any time of the day and night, except when I was in school. And even in school, I would sing in their plays and in fundraising things, right. And also maybe asked to go out and entertain the people that were in hospitals or veterans, things like that.
So you were listening to, at that point, you were listening to big band stuff?
Listening to anything I could.
Okay.
But they had a sort of a tiny talent time or whatever it was called, and so I went there and started to sing on Saturday afternoons at CKMO Radio, which later on would become an important part in my life too. And they liked the way I sung, and I was able to sing all the songs of the day and songs that I found in my mother's piano bench, because my mother used to play the piano. And when she was younger, she used to play in a music store, and people would come in and to buy sheet music, and they would plunk it down, and she would have to play that music, and if they liked it, they would buy it, take it home. She had strange songs in there sometimes. I remember one called, I've never seen a straight banana. Hello? Hey, you want me to sing that number? And another one, in my gondola, sweet raviola. I'll punch a hole in your gondola. But there was also songs of the day in there. Yeah. And So Long Ago and Far Away, and songs of that nature. And you mentioned Frank Sinatra, and Frank was an incredible singer. And so I decided not to sing like him, but I liked the songs that he sung. So I sung on radio.
How long did you do that?
Until I started singing more on the stage and doing more of those outside shows. Yeah. And also doing, I didn't go to high school for very long. I got out of there as quickly as I could. But I would sing for the veterans and for those that were in hospitals and anywhere I could. And then people started to hear that I was doing this, because a piano player who was playing there would say, I know a kid that, and then the next thing you know, I would be asked to do some songs and some singing, and maybe some talking too, because I would like to do things by Danny Kaye, or I would like to do some comedy stuff like Victor Borge.
Okay, yeah.
In other words, I used to say, gee, if you're going to do something that's difficult, really difficult. And I can assure you that Danny Kaye and Victor Borge are really difficult.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, that's just two of the many. Yeah. And then I used to do some some imitations. Imitate Maurice Chevalier, imitate a concert singer, imitate all kinds of different, Johnny Ray.
Johnny Ray.
Yeah, Frankie Lane. And do imitations of them.
Okay.
And they found out that I was doing this, so if they Metropolitan Life Insurance Company was having their annual banquet, then I would get hired and go out and do my 20 minutes at 25 minutes, and I'd get $50.
Not bad.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah, which later on assisted me to buy that 1910 Buick that I found in that old garage and haul it out.
Well, I had read, too, that you had, you also collected music, right? You collected records. I read somewhere, or somebody told me, that you would take any job you could, that you were setting up pins in a bowling alley once for, like, change, essentially, so that you could buy records, and you would come home with, like,
excuse me,
tons of records.
Yeah, there was 78 recordings were at an all-time low. Nobody wanted them anymore. So that's when I started to discover Jelly Roll Morton, Louis Armstrong and his Hot Five, Bessie Smith, Red Nichols and his Five Pennies, Bix Beiderbecke, and the list goes on.
Yeah.
And before you know it, I was a complete jazz enthusiast. Mainly, I was called a moldy fig.
A moldy fig?
A moldy fig is a guy, at that time, this was by musicians that were more into the latest realm.
Okay.
That was a guy that sort of was into everything from Dixieland and Nolans music, Chicago hot jazz and blues. But they were into bebop. So it wasn't long, though. I went down to Seattle, Washington, and went in the black section to take a look and see if I could get any race records down there, because they still had race records even then that were played in jukeboxes, juke joints. And I found something by Chubby Jackson and his Fifth Dimensional Jazz group called Lemon Drop, and I brought it and put the needle down on the record player, and I heard this thing go, and I went, what? What? It was okay to be hearing all of the stuff from the early days, but now the new era was in. And I finally started to realize the importance of Flat Fives and Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Thelonious Monk. And so I broadened my musical adventures.
You took off. My understanding is that you had a 31 Packard that you attempted to drive to New York in, and you didn't make it.
I made it. I mean, excuse me.
Yeah.
I did make it.
But the car didn't make it.
Well, it didn't make it, not because of it. I went through Snoqualmie Pass out of Yakima and into the Washington State, and I had to go over Snoqualmie. Now, this was in November, so it was like deep snow. So they made me put chains on, which in those days I had. So I put the chains on the Packard, which, by the way, an amazing car. There was a motto that Packard had, which was, "Ask the man who owns one." Now, that's a pretty daring statement to make. Well, of course, they were one of the three Ps, Packard, Peerless, and Pierce Arrow. They were high-end, beautiful, magnificent motor cars. Once you've driven a Packard, you never forget it. Never. I still would enjoy driving a Packard if I had one. Got through the Snoqualmie, blew a head gasket, and said, uh-oh, went and arrived in Deer Lodge, Montana. Went into a Packard Studebaker dealer because Packard had been purchased by Studebaker at that time. And the guy said, "What do you have?" In the parts department. "What do you have?" I said, "I need a head gasket." He said, "What for?" I said, "A 31 Packard 8, Super 8. He said, "Okay, anything else?"
You're in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere in 1957. So I went outside and looked, and then the guy came out, the foreman from the shop, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I've blown a head gasket, and I have to..." He said, "Oh, it's a beautiful car." I said, "Well, I've restored it." He said, "It's beautiful." "All right, you can use my tools." He said, you know how to take care of my tools?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Okay, you work out here." So I worked out there in the lot and changed the head gasket, put everything back together, fired it up, running on all 8. So he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "New York City." City's so nice you had to name it twice. Think you can lick it, get to the wicket, buy your ticket, go. So he said, "Okay, away you go." Paid, got out of there, got to Miles City, Montana, and as I'm driving through Miles City, a man stopped me and said, I said, what is it? He said, you're not going anywhere. I said, why? He said, because I'm buying your car. So I said, oh, I see. He said, take it over to my shop. I went in the shop. He had a lot of cars in there. And I couldn't turn it down. I thought it over. I said, maybe this would be good. I can take a train. So he bought me a ticket. Bought me a trunk for what little I had in the back of the car. I got to Chicago, that toddling town, city, you know, another one. I saw a man, he danced with his wife in in Chicago. It's the Windy City. So I came out of the train, and a guy had a heart attack, and I held him, and I did what I could until somebody came, and somebody said, you did the right thing, you saved it, blah, blah, blah. And then I looked around, and I said, New York, something, maybe I should go to Toronto. Not New York. I'll go to Toronto. And they already knew me in Toronto because of the television work I had done in Toronto. When they had descended over the Rockies by film or whatever it was called, because there was no direct line.
But you did make it to New York at one point. You were in the early '60s. You were in New York.
Yeah, that's what I went to Toronto, and then in New York. I think the first time I went there would have been. Oh, I think I did something that William Shatner was in on the waterfront. New York waterfront. Was he ever a detective or something? This is...
I don't know, a series? A TV series?
I think it was a series. Anyway, I did a part there, and then I came back. And then I went to Hollywood because they wanted me to do a part in a pilot film called Warbirds. Hoagie Carmichael was playing piano in that.
Good God, really?
Amazing to have a chance to be with him because he used to play with Bix and many other people and wrote great music. I mean, we're not going to get into Stardust, are we? Whew, of course we are.
One of the best songs ever, I think.
Ever.
Yeah.
Then I went back, and Lenny and I met.
Lenny Bro?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I got a call on the phone and said, you should meet this young man from Winnipeg. Well, Maine, really, but Winnipeg. Yeah. And I came and met him, and we both didn't believe what was happening. There was a synchronicity, there was a love, there was an open mind, very open mind musically. No biases, just hungry to learn, and we decided that we would get together right there. And hence that's when you said you got this.
Yeah.
They found that 40 years, I think 40 years later they found it.
That's right. Yeah, it was recorded in '62 and they found the tapes later.
I see, yes. Yeah. So Lenny and I decided to get a group together and call it Three, small letter 3, because that's what it was Leonard Bro playing the guitar and Eon Henstridge playing bass, and playing bass like the latest bass players were playing, because bass players, by this time, a few of them, very few, were starting to play lyrically instead of percussionistically. And I liked that. That meant there was space. There wasn't just a constant thump. And no drums. We didn't want any drums, because very few drummers knew how to lay out. A good drummer should know when to quit. Yeah. To boom smash all the way through things sometimes can be a bore, or it can be good. So we formed that group, and we went to Leibu,
yes,
where you saw.
That's right.
You were 15 years old.
I was 15, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I don't think Leibu ever had anything quite like us then or since.
I do have to ask you, though, as one little aside here, because I thought this was pretty cool. When you were in New York, and I guess it was around about this time, maybe a little bit earlier, you were dating a woman who I believe was Carla Rotolo.
Carla?
Whose sister was, at that point,
that was Bobby Dylan's sister.
Yeah, her sister Susie was Bob Dylan's girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
And you almost went on a double date, I understand.
Is that right?
I was told you almost went a double date, and instead you bailed and went to a Chambers Brothers concert.
We did. We go to hear the Chambers Brothers.
There you go.
Yeah, I want people get ready for the trains are coming. Don't need no ticket. You just get on board. Yeah, I love that concert. It was she was a wonderful person. She was really a nice, nice lady.
Were you aware of Dylan at that point? I mean, he was just starting to establish himself. Were you conscious of that?
I ain't gonna work on Maggie's farm no more. You know, I think he was doing things like that. Isn't it? Wasn't he on highways?
A little earlier than that.
Earlier
he was
than that.
just starting out then. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I want to talk about some of the other things that you've done, because you've done some, I mean, there are so many things to ask you about. You've been in, anybody who looks at your CV, it's like you're in everything. It's like you're Zelig, like you're everywhere over the last many decades. But I want to ask you about doing Finian's Rainbow with Fred Astaire, directed by Coppola.
Mr. Astaire.
What was that like?
It was exciting in as much as to work with Mr. Astaire was a dream come true. Because what a man, what a gentleman, what a talent, and what a legend. So when you get that opportunity, and you're working with Petula Clark, and she was right there in my arms, and she was wonderful. She was a good lady.
How was Coppola as a director at that point?
I think that he was flying by, he was really flying by the seat of his pants. He had just done a couple of experimental movies and then was hired to do this. So his plate was full, really full. And I liked one thing that they decided. I say they because I'm sure it was him, but I'm sure it was some of the other people that were in the production department decided that it would be better to do Finian's Rainbow as a play, as a Broadway show first. Not just shoot it, but do it as a play. So we did. We slowly but steadily put the show together. We would do some acting things, the actors would do things, and then sometimes the dancers would be over there, the singers would be over there. Then slowly but steadily we would bring them in and put the show on. And it was great. It became a Broadway show. We got used to the run, which is what we really needed to do for that, to make it as good as it was.
I've seen quotes from you saying that Coppola was actually giving Astaire instructions on how to dance into the sunset.
Well, that was just one thing. I think one of the nice things I remember is when the dancers were brought in, and I saw a girl dance by, and I looked at one of the dancers who was waiting for his entrance, and I looked and said, "Who is that?" And he said, "Oh, that's Miss Lily." And I said, "That's the one." And he said, "Yeah?" I said, "Yeah, that's the one."
She's been your wife for a very long time, hasn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're coming up to 45 or 47, I don't know, 47 years.
You better remember.
Try to remember the time you met Lily. Da, 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 da. Anyway, when we reached the end, well, one thing about Mr. Astaire I would like to tell you.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't eat much. I used to just eat some nuts and some fruit and some berries and drink some juices and things like that. And so everybody else was gorging themselves. And that left the rehearsal hall empty. And so I went to the rehearsal hall just to hang out. And I heard a piano playing. When I went in, I entered sort of quietly to be respectful of whoever's playing the piano. It was Mr. Astaire. And it was this ragtime, really left-hand stride piano, ragtime piano. So I was amazed. I didn't realize that he played. I knew that he would dance at that time. In his youth, there would have been some ragtime piano. That was, putting on the like lots of Charleston things. Anyway, so he was playing, but this was ragtime, this Scott Joplin type thing or Jelly Roll Morton type thing. So I stayed back, and then I wanted to hear, got greedy. I wanted to hear more. So I went, and he caught me out of his peripheral vision, went to stop. I said, we liked each other, so he kept playing. Nobody else was there. And he finally finished. And I looked at him, I said, that was great. And he said, I call it my whorehouse piano. And it was like the word whorehouse coming out of Fred Astaire, you know, what? And a little later on, I was granted, he had his own cottage. They gave him a cottage on the Warner Brothers 7 Art studio lot. And he said, you must come over for some tea. And so I was allowed 2.5 hours, just him and I.
That's pretty cool.
I didn't see it happen to too many other people.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was nice. And then, a year later, I was doing a show on Broadway called The Flip Side, and I got a telegram, and it said something about, do what you do, work hard, lad, or do it, lad. And it was signed Finian A on the telegram in the days when you got telegrams. Yeah. And I thought to myself, why would he know that I was on Broadway doing a show and send me a telegram? Very thoughtful of him, very nice.
I got to ask you about the Jackie Gleason, the LP. Jackie Gleason says there's no one in this world like Don Francks. Tell me a little bit about that.
They arranged that we would go, three.
Yeah.
Lenny, Ian, and myself would go and audition for the Jackie Gleason variety show. A big show. And so I went and auditioned. We went and auditioned, and I did some of the stuff, like I think it takes 8 minutes for me to do Bye Bye Blackbird. It goes into all realms. And that's, in fact, that had a lot to do with what Lenny and Ian and I were doing anyway. I would put things together and we would do it. And also I would feature Lenny a great deal because he was brilliant. I used to lug around 6 guitars with him when we were on the road. And Eon's big bass, which he called Ruby Round Sound, his upright bass. Then after that, we got the word back that we had been allowed to go on the show, but maybe we had to straighten out a few things. I had to sing something that the audience understood. Because some of this, they always said that, you know, some of the people in Nebraska might not know what was going on. So I sung As Long As She Needs Me, straight, with the fine strings and orchestra. And it was just what they wanted. And that knocked everybody out. And then Mop went in to do some of the things that we did. I don't know what we did. I think I would have to somehow find that. That's never been shown on television. Yeah. So I don't know what. I might have done Foolish and Favorite Things, which is where, after I had been with Lenny for a while when we first met, I was singing, these are a few of my favorite things, because John Coltrane had just made a hit record of it. Right. And as I was going along, I thought, boy, these are a few of my, these foolish things remind me of you. A tinkling piano in the next apartment, a tinkling piano in the next apartment, those stumbling words that told me what my heart meant. A country fairground that has painted swings. These are a few of my foolish things. Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens, bright copper kettles and what? Hey, wait a minute. They go together. So that song came in handy because I had to go and audition with Katharine Hepburn, for a show called Coco. This was before, this was when I was living in a teepee, and the tugboat came up and said, oh, anyway, so I went to, that was, the teepee came later. I went we were in Hollywood. I went to audition, and they said, sing something. You know what? I forget. The first thing I sung was a very straight Broadway type thing, like I did before, a straight Broadway thing. And then I sung Foolish and Favorite Things. And after I sung it, there was a big audience. I didn't know there'd be that much of the audience. And came up and said, where did you get that from? And I said, well, it was an idea. I thought, if one's a list of the favorite things, and the other song written in the 30s was a list of foolish things. And it almost sounded like they got the idea for the favorite things from the foolish things. I don't know that, though. And he said, it's brilliant. I said, well, thank you. And he said, by the way, my name is Andre Previn. And I said, Andre Previn? I said, you and your My Fair Lady album with Shelley Mann. Anyway, it was beautiful meeting him because I adore it. He's a great conductor and a good composer, and he's a fine pianist, brilliant pianist. Well, I didn't hear anything about Coco, and a year later I was living in a teepee in Lily and Cree Summer, and we were up in a place called Deep Cove, out of Deep Cove, a place called Wigwam Inn, making a film with Samantha Egger and Robert Culp, which never ended up on the cutting room floor. And I don't know where all that stuff is. I don't, because Miss Egger left us shortly after that.
Yes.
I got this call, and the guy said, come down to the C.Imp right away. And it's a tugboat, my favorite tugboat.
Okay. So there is a tugboat. Okay, good.
Yeah, a tugboat. Right. It was a Kate's boat. Kate's was the company in North Vancouver. And he said, this is 507, and I'm sending with Marine Live Radio, C.Imp. You had a call for Don Francks in Vancouver. This Vancouver, yes. You got just one moment, please. Hello, New York City. This is Vancouver Marine, but the call that you placed at the C, we put it with the C. Don Francks is on. I said, hello. He said, Don. Yes. I said. He said, this is. Oh boy, one of the writers of My Fair Lady and.
Okay, I can't help you there.
Oh gosh, I forget his name now. He said, this is me. He said, Kate wants you. I said, what? He said, Kate wants you. I said, what do you mean? He said, Coco, it's a go. He said, but you got to come now. Like, in fact, I'll make the plane arrangements once you say yes, and then you can come right away. I said, well, I just got called down from a shower I was taking in a waterfall called the String of Pearls. And didn't you write, on a clear day you can see forever? And he said, yes, I did. I said, well, I think I can see it. He said, does that mean what I think you're saying? I said, yeah. Tell Kate I'm sorry. He said, I'm not going to be the one to tell her. She's going to be very unhappy. She loves you. You're the only... Because I'd been told that she was a ball buster and that she... you better go toe-to-toe with her if you're going to be with her at all. Because that's what she likes. She liked a strong man. Well, I guess I must have been that. And so it ran for, I think Coco ran for a while.
So as long as we're talking about Broadway, I have to ask you about your one experience in a play that turned out to be kind of a legendary Broadway flop in that it only lasted, I think it lasted one night on Broadway, but played out of town. That was Kelly, it was called. Was
Kelly.
That yeah. Tell me about that.
I was called to audition for a show on Broadway. But then I got called to do another audition on the same day. One show was called Kelly, the other show was called I Had a Ball. I was the 199th person to audition for Kelly. 199 guys previous. 198. So, I did what I did, and I talked like I talked. And I sung what I sung, and I guess they liked it. But when I went and did a show for I Had a Ball, he was a little guy like this, he talks like this all the time. He was a comic. And he said, oh, come on, kid, do the thing. So I did the thing, and I did what I did. And then I got a call from Kelly the next day, and they said, you're Kelly, you're hired. And then I got the call from him, and he said, listen, you're the only one we want for the show for I Had a Ball. And I said, but I just accepted the part of Kelly, Hop Kelly. He said, no, you phone him and tell him you can't do it. You're going to work with me, Buddy Hackett.
I was going to say, that was just...
Great guy, Buddy Hackett. I loved him. And I decided to go with the lead role in this show, and I could have been with him because his show lasted 2.5 years. And you've already announced the lengthy run of Kelly.
But this was a guy committing suicide, wasn't it? Wasn't that the gist of the...
See, there was... I don't know if you've ever watched movies from the 30s, because that's when I've heard it mostly. You'll hear, are you trying to pull a Brody on me?
A Brody, yeah.
Are you pulling a Brody? Steve Brody, the man that supposedly jumped, or did, nobody proved it, jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, did he jump, or did he wait on by one of the pylons, or whatever they're called, and hold on in the darkness, because it was in the evening, and then they dropped a weighted dummy, and then he surfaced. Was that it, or did he really do it? Nobody ever found out. But what a big deal that was. The Brooklyn Bridge. So
it was a whole play based around that.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Everyone here loves Kelly. Everyone here loves Hop. We're crazy about his girlfriend. We even like his pop. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Everyone here loves Kelly. And I had a great song. Oh, you. This opening in the show. Pin spot. Derby hat. Pin spot. Oh, you great big bridge. Connecting Brooklyn with New York. You don't squawk. You just do your job. And it's a hell of a job you do. Connecting Mott Street with Myrtle Avenue. Oh, you mammoth suspension. You know, it's a great song.
I think rhyming squawk in New York is pretty good.
You don't squawk, New York.
So
bringing civilization as we know it to both sides of the brook. You carry your burden alone, oh structure of steel and stone. You carry your burden alone, oh the moxie that you have shown out there all alone. Structure of steel and stone out there all alone, oh the moxie that you have shown. Oh, you great way to open.
Remember this still?
I don't know. I can hardly. I did remember. Alan J.
Lerner, yes, that's right. There you
Alan
go.
J. Lerner.
Yeah,
that was who called from to do Coco.
But so this closes in one night. How do they tell you that? How do they break the news to you that?
Well, what happened was the three. I called them the three unwise men. You know, this is sort of a little different way of saying it, isn't it? Three unwise men. That was Joseph E. Levine, Daniel Melnick, David Susskind. All started, well, not so much Mr. Levine. Mr. Levine was too busy making schlock movies and starting to make good movies. But somebody told him, why didn't you come and do some Broadway? Oh, boy. And Mr. Melnick went on, you know, to do Get Smart and a few other things. And then, of course, David Susskind, who I think at the time was married to Joyce Davidson.
Davidson, that's right.
It was called The Snow Queen. And they kept changing things, and soon they began to change so much and letting people go from the show. And the director, Herb Ross, who was phenomenal, a great director and a great choreographer, holy smoke, and had dancers that he had brought from Brooklyn and places that were, whoa, were they strong, and able to dance any kind of dancing. And the singers, wow. And all of a sudden, the next thing you know, this was changed and that was changed. They were gone, a new piece of music, and then pretty soon the writers weren't allowed to come in to their own show, to the show they'd written. They were locked out.
So they killed it, basically. The producers basically killed it.
Boy, I said to them once when the producers invited their friends in to see the show, and the friends they invited in were most of those people that sort of, why aren't I in the show? I should be in this show. Those people aren't very talented. What am I doing here? And I'm not enjoying this at all, even if it is good. So after the show was let out, and I went to the producers and said, you know, I don't mind. Now, I knew my cast. I called them my cast, because I was Kelly. But I called them my cast. And I said, you know, my cast has just had the wind knocked out of them. I said, they haven't got any confidence they had is sort of put on hold. I said, I don't mind you putting in your thousands of dollars, but don't try to put in your 2 cents worth. This is our sandbox. We know about this. We're the magicians out here. Just cool it. The next day I got this expensive jacket and let bygones be bygones.
Oh, their way of apologizing.
That was their way of apologizing, that they'd stepped on it. But they kept on stepping on it, and before I know it, I was starting to say lines that sounded like I was just off the Borsch circuit. Wait a minute. These are just one-liners. This is shtick. Schlock. And then I was introduced to Mel Brooks, who had been brought in as a writer to change things.
Oh, okay.
And I went, oh dear. And then we got the news. The next day when we turned up to do the show, the next night, said, show's over, blah, blah, blah. So I called up a piano player friend and said, I need a gig. I'm out of a show. He said, well, I got to play piano at Upstairs at the Downstairs, right in the heart of Manhattan. I said, I'll take it. So I went there, and I did open my show with, has anybody here seen Kelly? K-double-L-Y. I figured what a good number to open with, right? Because nobody'd seen it except Cohen had come. Nathan Cohen had come from Toronto to see me.
Well, did he like it?
He thought it was good.
Because he usually hated everything.
Well, he hated everything, but I got him once when he said that the connection was no good on opening night. So I called Jack Gelber in New York and said, come up here, Jack, please. He came right away. I sent him a ticket. Came up, sat in the audience. Right next to him, well, a couple of seats away from him, Nathan Cohen. Watched the connection. At the very end, I said, please don't leave. The audience is gone, and I said, Mr. Gelber, Mr. Cohen, Mr. Cohen, Mr. Gelber, Mr. Gelber, Mr. Cohen, Mr. Cohen, Mr. Gelber wrote the show you just panned. How did you like it, Mr. Gelber? How did you like your show? He said, this is better than San Francisco and better than New York. Thank you, Jack. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cohen, for staying. And the next day, it was, connection changed. Much better now.
It was the same play.
It was the same play. We never changed a thing.
That was a play, you told me before we started that was a play that had a big impact on you.
Very.
How come?
It ceased to be a play. The audience never knew whether it was a play or not. They started to look around and wondered, are these people... It was very real.
About junkies?
Yeah. Very, very real. And the actors all spoke to the audience every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been involved in a play of that nature since or before.
Really?
Yeah, that was
Wow.
a great play.
I want to ask you about your...
I'd like to do it again.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'd love to do it again.
Have you ever thought of mounting it
Yes.
yourself?
I asked if we could mount it down in the distillery district,
Yeah.
but wasn't really interested. I wanted to do that, but he wasn't interested. I think they like to run with a lot of old chestnuts down there. They really do.
To play it safe.
Yes.
Yes.
And if it isn't old chestnuts, it's those that have sort of got a good run. They've had a good run before, and they'll bring them back.
Yeah.
And I'm not condemning them. I think it's a great place.
I want to ask you about the 70s, because you, my understanding was that you didn't like living in the States during Vietnam much.
No, not at all.
And
Not
you,
at all.
You left. Mm-hmm. You and Miss Lily.
Mm-hmm. And Cree Summer.
Yeah.
We went back to where we'd gotten married. We went back to Red Pheasant Indian Reserve. I couldn't stand the LAPD, the Los Angeles Police Department, their treatment of freethinkers and gypsies. I mean, gypsies meaning freedom seekers. Hippies was not nice. In fact, their treatment of Watts up. Well, it's on fire if you're not careful. I decided I had enough. Also, the last role I had was on Mission Impossible, trying to start the Third World War. That didn't interest me. Lily was working with Dean Martin.
Dean Martin, she was a dancer,
She
wasn't
was
she?
a dancer with Dean Martin, and so she was working with Dean Martin, and she was sort of getting a little ho-hum on that because there was nothing sort of exciting, and she was a very creative and a very complete dancer. The ballet, tap, modern, all of that was part of her upbringing.
Yeah.
She knew that. She studied, in other words. So we went back to learn. I went back to learn on the old ways, and she went back to something she'd never, ever expected at all.
Yeah.
Had only experienced for a few moments when we got married there and spent our honeymoon night in a teepee with about 20 other people eating peyote and praying and healing. And in the morning left and went to, because I got a call from New York at that time. Somebody called the band office and found out that we were having a morning feast and said, you've got to come to New York City. Why? Because Metro Media wants you to do a show with a man called Joe Raposo as your musical director. He later on became the musical director for Sesame Street.
They find you no matter where you are.
No matter where I am, I don't know how they do it. I try my best. I remember Ronnie Collier saying, you've been trying to get out of show business for so long. Anyway, came to Toronto, got to New York Central, and went from there on the train to New York. And on the way to New York, got up in the morning. We got up in the morning, and here comes a guy into the dining car. He's got a toque, he's got a scarf, he's got an overcoat, he's got galoshes, he's got gloves, he's got everything. And he comes in and sits at the table, and I look and go, it's him. She says, who? I said, when we're up on the mountain in our skytop house, and I used to play you the Goldberg variations, and I used to play you the well-tempered clavier and everything, and things from. She said, Glenn Gould. I said, yes. She says, well, go and say hello to him. I said, I can't do that. She says, you never lost for words at any other time. And I said, well, okay. So I approached him. He had his gloved hands in the menu. I'm sure not seeing anything really that good to eat. because it wasn't. And he looked up and I said, wow, I can never understand why I'm so brilliant, so absolutely brilliant. I said, Mr. Gould, I presume. I do that because I deserve it. You don't do that. And he said, Mr. Francks, I presume.
Wow. There you go. How'd that make you feel?
I about fainted. I didn't believe that he would have anything to do with me or know me. Later on, I found out that he was secretly in love with Petula Clark, and I have a feeling that had something to do with it, because I had, held her in my arms and said, I look at you and suddenly something in your eyes I see soon begins bewitching me. It's that old devil. And I said, I just appreciate you so much. And he said, well, I appreciate you. And I said, thank you. Enjoy your meal. He said, you too. And that was that.
Nice.
Little did I realize that was the time I said, I wanted to say, let's get together and blow some things, do some music together, because I had already really goofed by not getting in contact with Charles Chaplin, because that was my mentor. He was the one that anything that I just knew everything that he ever did. I made sure I watched everything he ever did. And that was the one that I thought was the most amazing man in the entertainment world.
Did you know?
No.
No, you never met him?
No, I read his books. Yeah. I got his first book, My Trip Abroad, and in which he said there will be no more war. That was 1923, because they were forming not the United Nations,
the League of Nations.
The League of Nations, and he said, now I'm so happy to be arriving back in Hollywood at the station, knowing there will be no more war. And as I read the book, I thought, oh, you naive man, you beautiful human being. No wonder you thought that. What an ungodly war the First World War was.
I want to ask you about your First Nations name is Iron Buffalo, right?
Yes, it is.
How did you get that name?
Kingbird Baptiste Umapesis gave me that name. I was named after a chief who used to ride amongst the buffalo, right in with the buffalo, with his horse. He was a brave chief. And he said, I name you that because you will be you're strong. You're strong like the buffalo. You are a good provider, just like the buffalo is a provider. And you know where you're going. All of a sudden now I'm starting to talk like him now, because I remember him talking to me.
How long ago was that?
67, 68. Yeah, 68. And Lily was called Miko Kaheo, Red Eagle. She flies above us all, sees everything that's going on, and so it's so funny because, there are those times, if I'm not careful, really careful, how I am, then I know that I'm called an ironic basket case. Because when you bear a name like Iron Buffalo, you better be careful.
You have to live up to it.
Yes, you do. And so you go in, as I said, when we got married, we were in the teepee with 20 or 30 people. It was a big teepee that had been put up. It was May. We'd been married out in the grass. There was a jackleg preacher there because he had to be there, because otherwise Saskatchewan would not acknowledge that we're married. Right. So a jackleg preacher came.
A jackleg preacher?
That's a name. That's for a traveling preacher, man. Now, that name probably came from the South. Okay. A jackleg preacher.
All right, I like that.
Yeah. And he came and married us. with the good book.
Yeah.
But we got married with my book because I wrote a book called Love Forever. Yeah, One Love Forever. And we read it. It was a book I wrote in 4 days in New York while Lily was doing working with Juliet Prowse in Sweet Charity in London. And I walked across the water and went to her in London. And then I came back to do a show because Archie Elaine, the drummer, had been hurt in an accident very badly. So I did a show called Hear Me Talking to You, a show that I co-wrote with Ronnie Collier to raise money for him so that he could be patched up. Now he's still doing it. He's still drumming. Right now, as we're talking, he's probably drumming somewhere with his band called Collage. And
I want to ask you, and this would apply to both you and Lily, I guess.
we were eating peyote that was our wedding night. Our wedding night was eating peyote and praying and doing, and then that's when we left to go to New York City. Because Skitch Henderson, they'd fired Skitch Henderson, and so I got a show and I called it Coming Around. And then I got fired because they didn't like the guests I would have on. And they didn't like what I spoke about. I spoke about the fire, the air, the earth, and the holy water, and I spoke about love and peace and groovy. And I remember Biff Rose came on the show because I adored him.
Biff Rose, wow.
Yeah, Biff Rose came on the show as my guest, and he said, "It's happening, it's happening. Happy people don't go around throwing rocks, throwing stones, calling names, breaking bones. They just sit and groove. Too happy to move. People call them lazy and crazy, but it's happening, yeah." And I sung it with him, and he was amazed. He said, you know my songs." I said, "Of course I do. They're wonderful. You're a wonderful man."
This was a talk show or a variety show? What was it?
It was my show, and I could do whatever I wanted.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Pretty good.
Yeah.
As long as it lasted. How long did it last?
About 3 weeks, and then I went in, and there was the prez of Metro Media. And I came in, and I was carrying an eagle feather, my eagle feather, that I had been given for the marriage. It was from the bonnet of Chief Red Pheasant, which is where the name is, and that's the bonnet was I still have, of course, it's very old. It's from the bonnet. It was taken from the bonnet and given to me. When I had met Kingbird, by the way, was when we were working for the CBC. I was doing a great, great show called Other Voices with Dick Nielsen. One of the finest shows I've ever been on, and one of the nicest men I've ever worked with as a director and as a thinker, a good man, a good writer. And when I went there, I was introduced to him, and he said, "Oh," and he said, "Well, I can't do that, can't be there that day, but because we got a peyote ceremony." And I said, "A peyote ceremony?" Oh. And I had been with Carla in New York.
Yeah.
You
Rotolo.
met Carla Rotolo?
Yeah.
She had a Folkways record. And it was Folkways record of Native American Southern music, different kinds of music.
Right.
And she put the needle down on the record, and it went, "Yanna hoy no hi hi na hoy no hi na yanna hoy no hi hi na hoy no hi na yanna hoy no hi hi na hoy no hi hi na hoy no hi na yanna hi no no yanna hoy no hi na yanna hoy no hi hi na hoy no hi hi na hoy no hi na yanna hi no no. And he went, "Where did you get that?" And I said, "I learned it from a record." He said, "You're coming to the meeting." And I went to the meeting, and I remembered it was my first time at a peyote meeting, and I remember during the meeting One of the ones looked up and said, "You guess you wonder why you're here. It's because you're supposed to be here." I said, "Thank you." Anyway, then later on, I found that I was being taught how to put up lodges, how to put up sweat lodges, how to be there to do grave cleanings, and how to help do many, many things. Old ways things.
Have you ever had, I'll ask this, we've got just a couple of minutes left here, but I have to ask about this, because there are two, your life seems to function in these two completely different worlds.
They seem to be different. Well, you know, sometimes when you're sharing with people, one way or another, when you're sharing, whether I'm not an actor, I'm a reactor. I'll react to you. As long as I can share. Because, as John said, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. So therefore, being an earthling, you know, I'm not a Canadian, I'm just sort of visiting here. This is my location, and it's very nice of the Canadian people to allow me to be here. No, really, when you consider it. And I have no holy books, I have no flags, all of those things. I have no socio-religio, I've cleaned my slate, but I do have fire, air, earth, and water, because those are the very things that give everything, life itself. And when you know that life itself is in total jeopardy, you sort of say, either I give up, or I still think about, what is it? The desperation I can handle. It's the hope that's killing me. So what happens is you say, maybe there's one other. Fire, air, earth, water, and magic. And maybe, is that magic common sense? Is that one of the five senses? Seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling. Common sense. Maybe that's the sixth sense.
We've run short of time.
Yeah, I know we are. And I don't know what's going to happen, because they've...
No, I meant on the show.
Oh,
I'm not talking existentially here.
Well,
that may be true.
How about both? You understand? We're running out of time, people. But okay, if you want to go this way, it's up to you. You're either living in dreamland or in pure hell.
Don, it's been a hell of a good time.
Hey!
Thanks a lot for doing this.
This has been silly enough for you guys. I want to thank all of you people for helping here today, the camera people and sound people and the unsound mind of Don Francks. Or as I call it, the insanity of one man.
Excellent.